5, 6, 7, 8.
Hi EXers, welcome to the EX Podcast episode number 66. This is your host, Stefan Vincent. I'm here today with you because we need to shake things up in the world of HR, talent acquisition, and company culture in order to create positive employee experiences in our organizations. Your workplace doesn't have to be a dreadful place where employees feel disengaged. This podcast brings a different lens to the HR, employee engagement, and company culture conversation. We approach these topics from a brand and customer experience perspective rather than a traditional HR perspective. Our guests, all thought leaders and disruptors in the EX space in their own way, come to this show to share best practices on the key elements that foster employee engagement and strengthen company culture, and also to spark the conversation on how to create these positive employee experiences. Not every company can do what Airbnb or Google do around their employee experience. And this is what this show is all about. Sharing stories of companies of all sizes, not only to show that EX doesn't require a large budget or a large team, but also that there isn't one recipe. Each company can find its own way through the EX journey. Today's guest is Mia Hanson, President of BreakFree Strategies, a certified partner for the Predictive Index. Today with Mia we talk about why managing people the way we would want to be managed is not the best way, how to leverage behavioral data to drive the candidate experience and customize the interview process, and how managers can leverage employee behavior data used for managing and coaching. This episode is brought to you by Fusion Alliance. Fusion Alliance delivers holistic solutions fusing together data, digital, and technology to redefine customer experiences and move your ideas to execution. That's why businesses across multiple industries have relied on Fusion's expertise and partnership for over 25 years. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Mia. And because it takes a good amount of time to produce this podcast, please make sure to review the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, or YouTube, as it would help promote the content. If you want me to speak at your next events, get some advice on your EX initiatives, or send me feedback and suggestions for future topics or guests, you can reach me at svincent@exsummit.com or on Twitter at EX_summit. All right, let's get to it. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the EX Podcast. Super excited to welcome to the show Mia Hanson. She is the president of BreakFree Strategies, and she's also a certified partner for the Predictive Index. Mia, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Stefan. Thank you for having me on the X Summit podcast.
We connected a few weeks ago in the EX Summit in Philadelphia, and through our conversation, we were talking about behavioral assessments and how many companies actually use some behavioral assessments, but they don't necessarily know how to implement them and how to use them after their employees or potential hires took the tests. And I thought it would be a good conversation to have on this show and really give some examples on how those companies can really leverage behavioral data to increase or to improve employee interactions.
Yeah, so I that was a great conversation that we had, and I think one of the things that we had talked about was that not all behavioral assessments are created equal. Some will offer you, in the terms of software and the platform, will offer you ways, different reports that you can use it, not just for hiring, because I think historically most companies think of behavioral assessments for hiring specifically, but also also from not just the hiring, but through the whole life cycle of the employee. So the engagement and retention of that employee, and even before that, the onboarding. Once you've hired this perfect candidate that you have benchmarked what you're looking for, and you've then hired them, how do you onboard them? Because as I remember in your seminar, which was fantastic, we did do a piece on onboarding, and I'm of the mind that everyone needs to be onboarded the same way by onboarding them differently, in that, we think of that golden rule of treating others as you would want to be treated, but in the end, for managing, that could be a kiss of death. Really, we need to not manage folks, not onboard folks, not work on our teams the way that we would want to be managed or coached or onboarded, but the way that person would be most effectively managed or coached or onboarded. And so there are certain platforms out there that, other than just using it for hiring, they take it all the way from hire to inspire, and actually how to best engage that employee and how to then retain those great employees that you've just hired.
So before we get to the first question, tell us a bit more about who you are and your backgrounds, and then we'll go into some of the details about behavioral assessments.
Oh, boy, I have a very varied background. My degree is Management Information Systems and Computer Science. But then after living around the world with my husband at the time, who was with Cisco Systems and their Globalization Center, we lived in China, in India, in Turkey. And while I was doing those, I picked up various different things that I had interest in. So in China, I did websites for international companies and that type of thing. And then my most recent stint in China, I actually owned a catering company in Shanghai. So a little bit varied as far as my background. I founded, along with my partner, BreakFree Strategies about 4 years ago. And then I'd say about 3 years ago, we became a certified partner for the Predictive Index. And they are just one of the tools out there for behavioral assessments. Obviously, I'm a little bit, I'm more biased to it, but there are a lot of great assessments out there.
Okay, so tell us why managing people the way we would want to be managed is not the best way, as you alluded in your introduction.
Right. Well, I really do think that if you know what drives an individual employee, you're most likely to customize that coaching and that managing based specifically on that employee's individual needs. For instance, I have what we would call a high dominance. I like to put my thumbprint on things. I like to lead folks. I don't like to be micromanaged. But as a manager, I have to be aware of the folks that on my team that have a lower dominance to them, that prefer team-oriented work, that prefer collaborating and that type of a thing. And they really prefer someone, unlike me, where I don't want to be micromanaged. There are people out there that really do need the information as much as you can give them to be successful in their position. And they want that information. They crave that information. They want that leadership. So if I don't know that about my employees, then my fallback would be to manage them or coach them in the way that I would want to be managed. And really, when it comes down to it, that can be very harmful to the relationship between the manager and the employee. And it also goes for coaching as well. It's the same thing as far as giving someone thoughts and background on best practices and that type of a thing. Some folks want a lot of detail and information, versus some people just want you to tell them, here's your goal, and you figure out the best way that you're successful doing it. But if you don't know that, then you don't know how to best manage and coach those people.
Right, and there's the saying that employees don't leave companies, they leave managers, meaning bad managers. But oftentimes, companies actually promote to management positions high-performing employees, the best salesperson, or whatever else it might be, right? But those individuals becoming managers don't necessarily have the essential skills to be able to really coach and grow employees on their teams, right? They're more. They might be more dominant, so they might be more driven focused, but they tend to see managing a team through their own lenses versus empathizing with different employee types and needs and motivations. So, is it just a lack of training that companies don't see, that they're not able to provide that sort of training for the managers, for the people they put in management position, or is it just a different approach that they need to have?
Yeah, you know what? You're right. And I think we all know those stories where you have somebody that's on, let's say, an assembly line that is a fantastic employee, and then they get promoted to be a supervisor. And then 3 months later, even though in the past they've been with the company for years, they're promoted as a supervisor, and within 3 months they leave. What is it? Why? This was a valued employee, and you thought by putting them, promoting them to supervisor, you were doing something really good for them. But there's a couple of different things at play here. There are some folks, if I think of somebody where they have to lead some people if they have to manage some people that they might feel intimidated or something like that, they're not going to be comfortable with it. That's the first point. So you kind of have to, as you're going through that process of determining who is going to be made a manager or moved from a sales position to a sales management position, you really do have to take a look at their core drives. And not only that, but there are, as you mentioned, to your point, there are those managers that they don't have the experience in managing a large group of people. But if you can give them a tool that tells them these are the 5, 6, 10 people that you're going to be managing directly, and you give them a sense of what makes that person tick, then that manager is more able to adjust the way that they manage those individuals. And my third point on managing is Stanford University did a study, what was the most critical aspect that made a really good leader, a really good manager. And that one most critical aspect was self-awareness. If you've got managers who are very aware of their own strengths and their own weaknesses, they're more able to first play up on their strengths, but also find people to surround them that can fill the gaps of those weaknesses. And that's what makes a good manager. But in addition to knowing themselves, they also need to understand the people that they manage and that they coach.
I'm a firm believer in the concept of cultural or culture add versus culture fit. And for decades and decades, companies on the recruiting side have been looking at candidates who fit in the mold, right, or fit in the norm, and basically just hire people that are exactly the same, or sort of robots that just follow each other, while versus looking at the diversity of backgrounds and mindsets and experiences and so forth, that actually bring and add something new to the table, not just exactly what everybody else has been able to do. So what we talked about, doesn't this also speak to hiring the correct behavioral traits for the position even to begin with? And do we have to look at those behavioral assessments to identify, first of all, what gaps are we having in the team that we're trying to hire for? And therefore, how can leverage this behavioral data to be able to identify the right person is going to fit into that team, but also is going to bring something different that nobody else is already bringing to the table.
Absolutely. I mean, the key to great leadership teams is balance, is having the yin and the yang. If you don't have the yin and the yang, it's bound to go off the rails. Mm-hmm. There was a story that another certified partner, he is out of London, and he told a story and when I was in a meeting that we had where it's a large multinational company. They're German-based, and they had two factories, one in Switzerland and one in Germany. And the president of the company couldn't understand what was going on, why one factory was just killing it. They were doing very, very well. And then the one in Germany was suffering. It was struggling. It had been struggling for years. And so they had asked the certified partner to come in and do an analysis on the leadership team. And when they looked at the Swiss team, the leadership team was varied in their behavioral traits. You had some that were highly dominant, some that were highly extroverted, some that were highly patient, and some that were highly formal in the way that they dealt with things. But then you also had the other side of that, where you had, some on that team that were lower dominance, lower extroversion, lower patience, and lower formality. And so you had a lot of balance, and that's important. What was happening with the German team is the CEO of that particular factory, or the leader of that factory, was what we call a persuasive. He was dominant, he was very extroverted, very low patience, and very low formality, meaning when we talk about formality, meaning that thinks outside of the box, sees the gray, tends to beg forgiveness rather than ask permission, that type of thing. And you need that because it pushes the limits and it pushes companies forward. But as he was bringing on his leadership team, and this is very common because it's human nature. We tend to veer towards people that are more like we are. So as he was bringing on his leadership team, he was bringing on people that he just innately felt were just like him, right, and that he could work well with them. And so then you had all these people on the leadership team, very similar. They were all very dominant, all very extroverted, very low patience and low formality. So what was happening was, as you'd walk through this factory, you'd see these starts of all these great projects, but they were just starts. No one could get it off the ground because what you had was a room of leaders that, all had these great ideas and were pushing novel things, but nobody to sit back and ask the right questions. Have we done a market study on this? How are we going to pay for this? These types of questions. So it's critical especially with leadership teams of companies, to put a balanced team in place. Otherwise, it's going to be lopsided and you're going to run into that same issue that the German did.
It goes back to the idea of self-awareness that you described earlier.
Absolutely. It's very true. So, when we think of teams especially, one of the things that I talk about a lot is Tuckman. I don't know, a lot of people probably know of this. It's Tuckman's model of group and team development. It was developed in the mid-60s, I believe. And since then, there's been a lot of iterations of this concept, and they might change the names a little bit, but really at the base of it, it's the same as this Tuckman's model of group and team development. And that is that no matter what, when you have a team or a group that comes together, they're going to go through 4 steps of development. They're going to go through forming, where they all come together. They first come together, everybody's polite, everybody's respectful and friendly. And then they get to the next step of development, which is storming. And that is when folks tend to bump elbows. Some people tend to protect the knowledge that they have and not want to share it. And so the efficiency of the team tends to go way down during storming. They're not being effective as a team, but they will eventually get to the third step, which is norming. And that is when the efficiency and the effectiveness of the team starts to increase again. That's when either consciously or unconsciously, they realize, you know what, we've got to get through this. We've got to get it done. And we've got to find a way to get past these issues that we're having. And then that leads to performing, where really the effectiveness of the team is more than 1 + 1. It's 1 + 1 = 4 or 5. It's the effectiveness of the team is far more than the individuals combined. So the whole point with Tuckman's model of group and team development is you've got to get these project management teams, you've got to get these leadership teams, you've got to get these teams to performing much more quickly these days. You don't have the luxury of taking your time with these types of things. So if you have a team analytic and you know, and the whole team is aware of the behavioral traits of every member of that team, there becomes a little bit more respect of the differences, and you kind of already know how the team is going to behave in each of those 4 steps. Does that make sense?
Yes, and what is very interesting is a few weeks ago I had Mark Williams, who is the Chief Marketing Officer and Chief Product Officer for a company called People First in London, in the UK.
Uh-huh.
And he was talking about what he sees as the future of work, which will be more project-based.
Absolutely.
Meaning that when a project comes to, not to life, but to the planning phase, you may have to temporarily hire or borrow individuals from other teams in your organization, not just your team, but other teams, right? And that's
right.
That's where you might be able actually to form the perfect team, looking at different behavioral data to pick the right individuals, not only with the right skill sets, but also with the right mindsets and behaviors to be able to form a high-performing team, right? And that's where I believe the more we move into project work, the more we'll see behavioral data playing a huge role in putting together teams for the duration of the project, and then the team would just be dismantled and move in different directions for other types of projects.
That's right, and I think everything's changing. We're in very crazy times right now. Even the market for employees is changing, and hiring is changing. We're no longer in an employer market; it's an employee market. So that's one of the things. And then you've got this new thing that's coming out. I don't know if it's all around the world. I know it's pretty, it's growing quite a bit here in Philadelphia. And it's more of the gig economy. So where these younger employees are doing what they call gigs. So they might not necessarily be a full-time employee of a company, but they jump from project to project to project. And so as you see those kinds of changes, as well as more leading or more innovating through different project teams, you really are going to see a need for more of this kind of data to help put those right teams together.
So let's continue on this topic, actually, and be able to identify the right people for the right position for the right project. So, obviously you want to ask specific questions to be able to see if those individuals are going to be a good fit for what you're trying to accomplish, again, for that particular project, not for a lifetime dedication to one organization. So can employee behavioral data help customize the interview process? And if so, how?
Absolutely. And, I don't know, I can't speak to other behavioral assessments, but I can speak to the one that I work with, in which as a position becomes open, and not just from a project team position, but even just a position within a company, if you have the key stakeholders in that position do what we call a job assessment, where they are choosing phrases that are critical to the effectiveness of that position. And what happens is when you have these key stakeholders in a particular position, whether it's the hiring manager, whether it's HR, even if it's somebody that's in the position now that knows that position well and is successful at it, if they do what's called a job assessment, the software then pulls all that data together and will give you the perfect profile or a profile of that perfect candidate, so that as you're bringing in candidates that you are interviewing for the position, it will then show you this is what you're looking for from a behavioral standpoint. This is candidate number one's behavioral traits. This is candidate number two's behavioral traits, three's, and so on and so on. And you'll know whether or not there's a match, there's not a match, there's somewhat of a match. And then the system, in addition, gives you interview questions based on whether or not there are matches or not. And that's critical because now you're talking about interviewing specifically to that person. I mean, we all know with Glassdoor and all of these different websites out there, candidates are getting really good at interviewing. And they can know what you're going to ask them even before they step into the interview. And so why not tailor that interview process specifically based on the needs of that position? And this is very objective, the needs of that position versus the traits of that employee or that candidate that you're looking to hire. So that if there is a little bit of a mismatch, it'll give you specific questions to ask to dig a little bit deeper and understand whether or not that person has the ability to fit well in this position. And then in addition to that, once you've gone through and you have chosen your candidate and who you're going to employ for that position, the system should give you onboarding information on how to best onboard that particular person.
That's critical too, yes.
It is, absolutely. And so that's kind of, one of the great things about some of the behavioral systems out there, some of the software platforms, especially mine, is that you can benchmark every single position that you hire for and determine what is it that I'm looking for from a behavioral standpoint. And then as these candidates come in, do they fit that? So that, 6 months down the road, you're not saying, wait a minute, this is not the person that I hired. This is completely different. This person is different than I thought that they were going to be in the role. So, and it takes the objectivity away, which is also critical. To be EEOC compliant these days, you have to be very careful with the way that you hire. And if you make it as objective as possible, then you're even more protected from that standpoint. So that's one of the most important things as well.
Right. And my whole take with the Employee Experience Podcast at Summit is to convince and to educate organizations on how to apply very basic principles on the customer side to the employee side. And when it comes to the customer experience, now it's all about customizing the experience to specific individuals, right? However, most companies tend to treat their employees as the same bunch of people. And even for the onboarding process, as you said, why do we have a very standardized onboarding process for every single individual? It just doesn't make sense.
Right. Well, there's a quote that we do sometimes that I've talked about, which is treat everyone the same by treating them differently. I'm not suggesting that we wouldn't have a standardized onboarding process, but I also do think that you need to vary that a bit. Right. Depending on the person that's in front of you. So, whether or not they want all that detail, they want specific information on how to be successful, or they want you to just, give them the reins and do it on their own. That's a very different person. And if you onboard them and coach them and manage them all the same, you're going to get one or the other is going to be frustrated. So that's why it is critical.
Yeah, and there's companies actually do it pretty well. One comes to mind is MailChimp, for instance.
Yeah.
The marketing automation software.
Yeah, I use them for my newsletter.
Right, me too. When they hire people for any type of position, for the first week, those new employees actually don't work on what they were hired for. They just talk to many different individuals, and they sit on many different teams. They talk to customers for the entire week, so they understand the general type of business, but it's also customized obviously to what type of role they're going to fill. But They want to have that big picture and big understanding of what's the company's purpose and how they serve their customers the way they do, right? So there are ways to customize it and to standardize it at the same time. But usually it's more on the standardization side versus on the customization side.
Agreed. And I think that there's got to be, it's not an either or, there's got to be something in the middle there that works for each company.
Right.
So I would agree with you on that.
Now, and I'll have to plead guilty on this one, but I've got to ask a question as well, probably a hard question to answer. I've taken many tests myself, either as an employee or as a manager, and I had people on my team taking many different tests, the Predictive Index that you're certified for, or the DISC, or the Myers-Briggs, or others. And usually it's what I call like a souffle, right? I talk about souffle because I'm French. So, you take that souffle out of the oven, it's all puffed up, and then suddenly you make a hole and it just collapses, right? And that's pretty much the same is, everybody gets excited about seeing the results of their test. I mean, maybe sometimes people don't, but usually they do. At least I'm excited about seeing the results. But then after that, nothing happens, right? Even as a manager, you're going to get some of the results of your team members of the test that they took, but you don't know what to do with that. So what is your recommendation, or what are your recommendations for organizations to be able to train and to empower their managers to take the extra step after the test is taken?
Well, absolutely. I mean, that's several parts. Part of that is the software platform itself. And I can say from a predictive index standpoint, it is hire to inspire, meaning not only just the hiring and then, here it is, and everybody, this is really cool, I love this, but also within that software, there is the inspire piece where it talks about the team building. It'll do team analytics for a particular project-oriented team. It'll say, these are the analytics of the team members. Here's how each individual communicates. Here's how each individual makes decisions. And that is shared with the team. In addition, the software platform should allow you to also understand peer-to-peer, meaning if you've got two folks on your team and let's say they're bumping heads and they can't quite get past this, there's part of the software that will do a peer-to-peer analytic and tell you, this is how employee A, his behavioral drives, this is employee B, her behavioral drives. And you need to understand that these folks are built this way, and you need to respect that because, again, we've got to have both sides of all of it. And that's one of our mantras at Predictive Index is all profiles are beautiful. And we do believe that, and we really try to teach respect of that. So part of it is the software platform. Is that software platform enabling the company, the managers within that company who all have access to that software, is that software platform enabling that for them so that they can use it day in and day out with their employees, with their annual reviews, with their teams, their project-oriented teams? That's one part of it. The other part of it is it's training. You touched on it just a bit. But the company should have tons and tons of training for different levels of the company where you, learn how to manage people to perform. So you get, I don't know that I can't say their name, but we have a large company. It's a household name. They do cold cuts and cheese and things like that. Everybody knows this name, but so we did managing people to perform through all of their district managers, and they all got reports on their people, and they learned how to individually manage those people. So that's another part of it, is the training part. It's critical, and keeping everyone up to date on that type of thing, and continually training these managers on how to best coach and how to best engage their employees. So that would be the second part. And then the third part, to be honest, is somebody like me. It's in my best interest to make sure that my clients are happy. I don't know about the other behavioral assessments out there, but we have about a 90% retention rate from year to year to year. And that speaks a lot to, I'm very hands-on, and I would say most of the certified partners that I know are very hands-on, and it's our best interest to keep that client engaged with the software day in and day out. So it's really a three-pronged way to go about it. It's the software platform. It's the training of all the folks within that company so they can be self-sufficient with the software. And then the third part is that certified partner or that consultant that's there to help you be successful with the software.
Right, and that's the critical piece. That's easy to get the test done and get the results. It's how you're going to be able to train the managers to effectively use the results and lead and coach and mentor their teams the right way. So it's the long term that is more difficult to implement than just taking the test itself.
Yes, exactly. You took it, Stefan. What did you think of your results?
I did. They were right on target.
Yeah, and how long did it take you to take the assessment?
Was it about 6 to 8 minutes?
Yeah, it's very quick. It's pretty amazing, isn't it? That something's so quick and easy.
I had taken it, I can't remember how long ago it was before I took it again with you. And the results were very similar, except that they were even stronger the second time I took it than the first time. But because I've taken all the different tests that exist out there, probably.
We call it an assessment, not a test.
Oh, sorry, assessment. Yes.
Test is scary.
Yes. So I couldn't remember what the assessment was about and how many questions and so forth. So when I was answering the questions myself, I thought, if I answer this way, is it going to sway the results that way? I was trying to see exactly. I was just curious because I didn't have any expectations, but I didn't have any pressure either to do it right or not. And there's no right or wrong, anyways, when you take those assessments. But I was really surprised with just very few questions how accurate the results were.
And that's kind of one of the keys to what we do is we want to make it a very positive experience for the person that's taking the assessment. There are assessments out there that take quite a bit longer, number one, and are forced choice, meaning you have to choose A, B, C, D, and even if you don't like any of them, you're forced to choose one, versus this particular assessment, the Predictive Index, it's open response. There is no pressure. There's no time pressure on you. But it's quick and easy, super quick, and it's a very positive experience. And that is critical, I think. I think sometimes, behavioral assessments in the past have gotten a bad rap, and this is like one of the things I preach about is that they're not all created equal. And that mantra of all profiles are beautiful, we really do stand behind that. So, and you got to have balance. You got to have the yin and the yang. So that's what sets us apart, I believe.
I agree. So let me, before we conclude this conversation, let me ask you some fun questions, and then we'll just wrap it up.
Okay.
If you were to invite someone, a famous or a historical figure, to dinner, who would you pick and why?
Oh, gosh. Okay, well, I'm a Philly girl. I'm sitting here overlooking the city, the beautiful city. And Ben Franklin's all over this city. So I would have to say Ben Franklin. I mean, what an amazing, a Renaissance man, if you will. And that would be of huge interest to me. So I would have to say Ben Franklin.
Okay, good. I don't know if you would pick someone from the Eagles or not.
Oh, yeah, Carson Wentz or Nick Foles. There you go. But they're not from the history, so.
No, not yet.
Yeah.
Maybe down the road.
Down the road, yeah.
What was your dream job growing up?
Oh my gosh, that's kind of embarrassing. I wanted to be, this is awful. I wanted to be a rock star. I wanted to be like a Sheryl Crow or Joan Jett or Pat Benatar. That's silly, isn't it, when I think about it now? But yep, that would be it.
Okay, nice. So what type of music do you like listening to?
Yeah, I would say rock, just overall, but also I like there's a lot of indie stuff out there that's really great right now that I'm enjoying. So, it's varied. I love jazz. I love bossa nova kind of music. I like a lot of hip hop as well. So, but if I had to pick one genre, I would say, and I love opera, but if I had to pick one genre, I would say rock and roll. Definitely. I'm a rock and roll girl.
Okay. What is your favorite vacation spot?
That one's easy. Bali, Indonesia. All my time in Asia. Bali, Indonesia. My God, there's something about getting off the plane and the smell of the air is the ocean and the incense and the flowers. It was amazing. What a great, beautiful, beautiful place on earth.
Okay, well, to stay on the same topic about islands and ocean and so forth, if you were to go on a deserted island, what would be the three items that you would take with you?
Oh, man. Okay, well, I love to cook. I definitely, so it'd have to be something to do with cooking, a knife or something, to that extent. I also love music, so maybe a transistor radio if I could get music there, or if not, then my iPod or, my cell phone. Only from a very aesthetic reason, though, music-wise. And final thing, I guess, could I bring my kids? I hate to keep them on a deserted island. That's kind of mean, isn't it? I don't know. I can't say the third. Maybe my husband, I guess. There you go.
There you go.
He'll be happy to hear that.
What is the best way for our listeners to follow you and BreakFree strategies on social media?
Well, I've got a LinkedIn page. We are at www.breakfreestrategies.com. Even if you just look up Predictive Index in Philadelphia, you'll probably see breakfreestrategies.com. And you can also just Google me, Mia Hanson, Predictive Index, or Mia Hanson, BreakFree Strategies.
All right, and we'll share those on the podcast notes as well.
Thanks.
Any last word of advice or wisdom?
No, thank you, Stefan. I would just say if anybody has not been to one of your summits, they really should go. I found it very inspiring and very informative. And so I'm just appreciative to be a part of this. Thank you, Stefan.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show as well, Mia. Thanks for tuning in to the EX Podcast. If you want to learn more, visit our website at expodcast.com. If you want to find out more about our next conferences, go to exsummit.com. Finally, you can also find my manifesto on business to employee or B2E branding at b2ebranding.co. See you next week.